Okay, we are live. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Randy Sadewick, and welcome to the Solar Fiesta. This is the 9 o'clock session, which is difficult for some people to do. So I'm going to talk about 100% renewables, and I'm just going to set some expectations about that. I wanted to start by saying that I'm going to go through a series of different parts of this particular topic. First is I'm going to talk about current reality. And the second thing is I'm going to talk about the transition. And then I'll go into obstacles. And then I'll finish with first steps. And really, first steps is a general topic because it's really as I will get into, this is really about a bottoms-up movement. 25 years ago, I started down this path. I read a book, and all of a sudden, I woke up. And for 25 years, I've been on this path of trying to understand what my purpose is, and I finally figured it out. And it was very surreptitious. I was reading about social change, and it led me into abolition, and then I got into reading about the Bible and the what's called the Gnostic Gospel, which is the unpublished part of the Bible that didn't make the cut. And in that, there was a section in there about receiving your name, receiving your identity. And that sort of caught me off guard because the idea that I've already received my name. My name is Randy Sadewick, right? But this is something different. It's about receiving your name through life. And so I believe that I have gotten that message. And that's how I got here today, to deliver this message to you. And I believe that this is one of the most significant social changes in the history of humankind. And it has very, very important ramifications. So today's reality, let's face it, fossil fuels is a transition fuel. It was never meant to be the long-term solution. It was never meant to be. And the result is it got maybe too far. And I'm going to talk about why it's ready to do now. This is like a hockey stick curve here. On the left axis, it shows you the dollars, and this is capital expenditures per million BTUs. A million BTUs, in this case, for oil, would be about 7 gallons of gas for your car. And this, since 1974 to 2014, shows you the curve we're on by choosing oil and by choosing nuclear power for our energy. You can see that this is clearly a hockey stick and really an unsustainable trend because it just consumes more and more of our resources. And the next slide shows you.
What does economic impact mean in this case? How much we spend to get, or how much we get from it, please?
How much you spend. Prices at the fuel pump.
Thank you. That's really all I was asking. Thank you.
Yep. So this chart shows you all the worldwide capital expenditures for the world. It excludes non-financial. It's non-financial. It excludes financial capital expenditures. This blue section here is energy. And it's sent from 2003 to 2012, it doubled. It doubled. This, in 2014, this number here represents $730 billion. $730 billion is being spent to drill for oil and gas, and though it's getting more and more difficult to get that energy, and it's having a shorter and shorter life. So those are the really important things, and not only that, but we're having more and more and more environmental consequences from this strategy and this oil that we've chosen. So here's the first picture of the environmental impact of fossil fuels. Everybody here probably remembers Exxon Valdez spill in Alaska by Exxon, and I understand that it's still not completely cleaned up yet. Exxon and the oil companies have a lot of attorneys, and they can fight and dispute things, whereas communities have no resources to really take on and get equitable retribution. The next slide shows you BP's oil spill just a few years ago in the Gulf of New Mexico, and a recent article in the newspaper also talks about same thing. People are feeling like BP has said we're done and we're on to the next hole to drill. So gas fracking, this is, there was a movie, anybody see Gasland? Yeah. So Gasland had some videos about fracking and all the chemicals that are going into gas drilling. And in general, even in New Mexico, we have a lot of fracking going on up in northern New Mexico. And, you know, we haven't heard about any contamination. And probably, you know, most of the time it's okay. But if it's not, if there's one mistake like this, it contaminates the water, and it's it. That's it. I mean, it's permanently contaminated. So this is the problem, is that the consequences of making any mistake is severe. And that's the issue. Here's a picture of the radioactive seawater impact of Fukushima Daiichi up in Japan, just north of Tokyo. And this was done by NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency. This is a picture here of one of the explosions. At first, they thought it was just a meltdown where the rods melt through, and there's a chemical reaction that causes steam and explosion. But this wasn't. It was a darker color. 3 of the 4 reactors are fed with uranium. The 4th one is fed with plutonium. And plutonium, this is believed to be an actual nuclear explosion here. And so that was definitely more severe. The then Prime Minister Khan tried to get to the bottom of this situation right away. And so he asked TEPCO, the power company responsible for this, and his government, what's going on out there. And he couldn't get a straight answer. So he decided to go out there and find out what's going on. Amy Goodman interviewed him afterwards and has this information available. He was on the fence about whether to evacuate 50 million people from the Tokyo metropolitan area or not. 50 million. He decided not to because I believe that the wind was blowing out instead of toward Tokyo. You saw this, you see the impact of this, but there's also radiation maps in the air too, and they show similar pictures. So really, what he said, he used to be a supporter of nuclear reactor fuel. Now he said, he's going around the country, he's been kicked out as prime minister, and he's going around the country and the world saying close all nuclear plants, they're too dangerous. There's too much risk, they're close enough. Palo Verde is very close to Phoenix. It's actually upwind from Phoenix. Palo Verde is where El Paso gets some of their energy, and P&M also buys some of theirs from Palo Verde. So, what's that?
P&M owns part of Palo Verde.
Yes, that's right. They own 10%, right. Here's one of the largest industrial projects in the world, and the tar sands is probably one of the most destructive in terms of the environment. And if you've seen any videos about this, it's pretty depressing to see the destruction that's going on for oil. And and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but Carl Hansen, who is a climate scientist, has, I'm sorry, James Hansen, excuse me. A climate scientist has said that this is like the last straw, and we go here and things are going to happen. So this was just in the paper in January. I don't know if you read that, but unfortunately, West Virginia had a coal chemical spill, and the company went out of business, and so the taxpayers will have to go ahead and pick that up for you. So, but that's irrelevant relative to the contamination in this area, and this whole waterway is just it's shocking in some ways, and so that's all I can say. Okay. I drove in this morning. By the way, is anybody still hungry? I've got some polystyrene and I've got some plastic. This, this will last a long, long time. So if you're hungry. Now, you think I'm being sarcastic, but actually, what's happening here in this specific vortex is that it's breaking down, and it's breaking down to a molecular level so that it can be ingested into plankton and other, so it's entering the food chain. So you will be eating this shit. We will be eating all this. I found this on the, on the trail one time. All these are one-time things. We use it one time and it lasts forever. Just like nuclear reactors, we use it a short time and then we have to take care of it for the rest of our lives. So this is the thing. I mean, most of this stuff isn't recyclable right now. So we're facing it. This vortex in the Pacific, they can only map part of it because they think a lot of it is submerged. It's about 270,000 square miles, which is about twice the size of New Mexico. And that's just one vortex. There are other vortexes all over the world in oceans where currents collide. So this is just one of many, okay?
So this is where all the stuff just
all the garbage congregates. It's sort of like the ocean dump. We have dumps here, and this is the ocean dump. Yeah.
It's actually a vortex in every major sea.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said there's a vortex in every major ocean. Okay. So this is just a simple chart I pulled from Wikipedia, and I verified some of the information, but not all of it. One of the charts here shows you the human emissions, and this is in gigatons. That's 9 gigatons of emissions annually, relative to about 120 gigatons of photosynthesis process. So seems like it's less than 10%, right? Should be okay, but unfortunately, CO2 accumulates, and it has they're not exactly sure, but they think it has between a 30 and 60 year life. So then you need to multiply that by 30 or 60, depending on how many years we're talking about. That's the impact. So if you want to deny the climate, I mean, look at those just big numbers and say, is that really possible that we're impacting it? Of course. What's really more scary than that to me, this chart shows you that the total stored carbon from all fossil fuels is about 10,000 gigatons. But over here, there's a deep ocean. It's really methane hydrates, and actually this has been considered for exploration to access more energy. Methane hydrates has a greenhouse gas factor about 27 times carbon dioxide. This is actually a bomb, and the bomb's gone off 50 million years ago. There was a collision in the ocean, and there was a substantial warming. They believe that the warming caused the bomb to go off. So all of a sudden, you've got a bomb which is equal to more than all of the fossil fuels that could go off all of a sudden. And in our time scale that we're talking about is very short. I mean, this bomb that went off 50 million years ago took millions and millions and millions of years for it to be released. But we're talking about less than 100 years in terms of the impact that we're having right now on our CO2. So this, according to James Hansen, is a serious issue. And he believes that because this is a book, it's called Storms of Our Grandchildren by James Hansen. And he wrote it back in 2008, and he's the one that gave Bill McKibben the target 350 parts per million, which we've already passed in terms of CO2, based on his information. And the next slide shows you a picture of Venus, and he calls it the Venus syndrome. So some people have said that, well, if we all go away, it's okay, the planet will continue. And that may not be true. He says here, I've come to conclude that if we burn all reserves of oil, gas, and coal, there's a substantial chance we'll initiate the runaway greenhouse gas. If we also burn the tar sands and tar shale, I believe the Venus syndrome is a dead certainty. That's what he said. He's not getting paid to do this. I believe that we're actually hearing somebody who's trying to make sense of all of this chaos that we're in.
Is that when the atmosphere gets saturated with carbon?
Yeah, and it traps so much heat that it starts to burn and become an engine for more heat. And I don't know the chemical process. He describes it in excruciating detail for you in chapters and chapters of forcings. So you can get all of the information you want. It's really hard to read. It's probably not a bestseller.
For the viewing audience, will you please repeat the question when they ask?
Good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay. The transition. So now we want to talk about the future and what this is all about. And let's start with this. That why transition? This next slide shows you. Go ahead. That and this has been seen and published over and over again. That I actually did this calculation on the back of an envelope, but I've seen many other calculations. 150,000 quads hits the United States territory every year, and we need about 100 quads for our entire economy, everything. So less than 1%. And I've heard that the entire world needs, entire world energy needs could be met in one day of sunshine. So that's the scale of this. The sun is free, it's democratic, we don't need to fight for it, we don't need to kill people for it, it's there for us. So here's another slide just showing you, reinforcing the same concept. Here's 1 year of the sun's energy compared to all of the fossil fuel energy sources. And so with this sort of logic, I don't know about you, but you ask the question, what's going on here? How did we get to this point where we are so screwed up? We're so committed to fossil fuels. How did this happen? And there's not a straightforward answer, but there's an interesting character. Excuse me for a minute. I found this in a bookstore. It's called The Poverty of Power. And really, this person studied the whole energy situation back in the 70s and concluded that really it's about maximizing profit. Really, that's what this is about here, is we have pursued this and had a structure, a government structure supporting it, and companies that were extremely powerful guiding this part down to to where we are today. And we've heard stories of GM buying up all the rail cars in cities and then dismantling them. So, you know, all of these things fit with this idea that this has been about maximizing profits of the few and not the many. Okay. So Richard Swanson, the founder of SunPower, put this chart together to show you solar power curve. So we saw the nuclear curve, we saw the oil curve, hockey sticking up. This is going the other direction. It's showing you that solar is down from a significant high, and this is the price of the silicon. And this is an incredibly liberating thing, and there's no war involved in this. And so this is just one example of how renewable energy can work for us. And this price, there's a roadmap that continues this progression down. You know, it's not like nuclear that can get to zero. It was claimed. So, okay. Wind turbines, it will deal with turbulence much more effectively than a straight, smooth-edged turbine. So it brings up all kinds of questions about how we do things. And I don't know if any of you have read Jane Benyus's book called Biomimicry. Have you heard of that? Anybody? Yep. So Jane talks about this. She researches a lot of things. And it turns out that the spider's web that is made from protein in a spider, if you would imagine putting a big net up in the air, you could catch a jet airplane. It's so strong. In flight. That's how strong it is. It's flexible, and it's as strong as steel. And it's made at room temperature with protein. So we have a lot to learn about what we could do to make our society work, which doesn't necessarily mean maximizing profits. Again, back to that thing that's happened to us here. So we're at a very unique time. We're really lucky to be where we are right now. This chart is showing you at a logarithmic scale the same thing I showed you earlier, where we're talking about investments and the capital investments for the energy required to power our transportation. A solar power electric vehicle versus a gasoline powered vehicle. So to drill for the oil, the cost, that's $730 billion required to invest in keeping our transportation versus investing in solar power to power electric vehicles. The big difference here is electric vehicles convert energy at 60%, 3 times more efficiently than a gasoline engine. And so that's what drives the conversion of these numbers down, and what it tells you that we're close to this point. Actually, this doesn't take into consideration tax incentives. So really, this could be a convergence that we're at right now, that it's cheaper to run an electric vehicle on solar power. Problem is we don't have solar power everywhere. Yeah?
It says capital expenditures, this exclude fuel costs?
This, no, this is, yes, it excludes fuel costs, just the capital expenditures. Yeah.
Have we already passed the inflection point?
Yeah, so his question was, does this include the fuel cost of the vehicles? And no, it's just the capital expenditures. And this is and this has no fuel, this does have fuel. So they have crossed. And partly the tax incentives haven't been reflected in here, but that's not as important. The other thing is, imagine now converting $730 billion to renewable energy to power our transportation. So that's a lot of PV. I believe last year, the PV industry probably manufactured about close to $50 billion compared to $730 billion for oil and gas. So this kind of a shift could really turn us around. And really, we're talking about jobs, and we're talking about the environment. We're talking about all of the things that are important to us in our community.
Randy, is there a question, answer that you might have for how many like gigawatts of solar compared to, say, Hoover Dam or something like that, so that the world production of photovoltaics is a certain amount of, you know, a kind of a body of energy that happened last year that we could think about, like if the world energy was 100 gigawatts, how much would have been the solar produced, or the photovoltaics produced?
So you're asking a question about how much energy it would take to replace the fossil fuels?
No, but if the world energy was 100 gigawatts, then the amount of PV panels produced is.
Okay, I'll answer part of your question a little bit later here, but in general, your question about how many in the United States, we need 100 quads of energy every year to power everything, transportation, electricity, all the heating and so on. According to my calculations, that's about 60 square miles of PV.
Okay, that's fine.
From here to Albuquerque and the other way. And I've seen another report that shows a little higher number, but that's, you know, that's close enough. 60 square miles to power all of the United States, if you had storage. Okay. Look, this is not just about PV. This is about ourselves. I think that the transformation has to start with ourselves and not just, you know, trying to change the system, because that's really what this is about. I believe this is nothing short of transformational. And so look at these 4 quadrants here about this: shadow, reality, integrity, and power. And if you look at these, they go a certain way. They go both ways, but one way seems better. Going from shadow to reality means accountability. And going from reality to integrity means stretch. And going from integrity to power is a calling, a mission, purpose. And power to shadow is humility. But going the other way, shadow to power is you know, hubris, arrogance, and going the other way, abdication and avoidance and denial. And I'm just going to give you an example of myself, because this is a path I've been on. I ran away from home a couple times when I was a kid. And as I got older, that translated into escaping from things. So pressure got too much, couldn't handle it, I would escape. I'd kind of disappear. It's another form of running away. And that evolved. But as I got to this point of awareness and realizing that this was happening to me, I had awareness, and suddenly I started to be accountable for that. So I started to recognize it. And then that awareness allowed me to even tell people, like my wife, hey, I'm feeling like I need to escape right now. It's just admitting where you're at. And then going from that integrity down to here is a calling. How do I want to be in the world? What do I want to be as a person? And that's the next level, which is this power. It's empowering to get to this level, to go through this. And I believe that United States of America is still down here. You know, our Constitution was based on freedom, and yet we had slavery from day one. So not only did we have slavery, but we enslaved Native Americans. And so we are stuck here, and we can't get out of here until we get to the point of admitting what we did to African Americans and Native Americans. The recent Pope has come public and said, I'm taking responsibility for the sexual abuse.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. What?
The Pope publicly said, I am taking responsibility for the sexual abuse going on in the church. He moved from here to here. That's what we need to do in everyday. And we can't get to this point as a population without moving to that. It's important. Next. So an individual, Marco Evangelisti, gave a talk on transitionus.org on the economics for a transition, a people's transition. And he talks about this model and how presidents of the United States take us to war. CEOs of companies drill in the Gulf and cause spills. They make these decisions and the community bears the impact of it. The community, the workers, and the ecosystem. We're the ones that are getting the brunt of the impact of these decisions that are separated from the people that have impact. If the president was going to war himself, that might reconcile what we're talking about here, because really the decision makers have to come together with the community. That's why the community needs to step up and start taking more responsibility for what we do. By the way, I'm going to make this whole presentation completely available. So any notes that you want to take is fine, but it's going to be yours to do as you wish. So this is the goal, 100% by 2035. That's 100%. 100. It's technologically feasible. 100% renewables. This is written in Europe, mostly by people who are very close to it. This is a fellow named Peter Droege, who's a professor and a chair of renewable energy in Asia. A sufficient number of theoretical studies and model simulations have been conducted to demonstrate that virtually all countries are capable of attaining fully renewable energy, electricity, and wider energy supply systems, period. These models and empirical investigations indicate that substantial benefits are to be expected from lower costs in health, ecological damage, and energy expenditures to employment gains and lower military risks.
Randy, before you leave the slide, why not 2030, like at Nazareth?
I like it. Hey, Photon International is saying 100% renewable. Photon International has developed a model for reaching 100% renewable energy supply in Germany in 2030. So there are many places to go to find one. I thought that I would probably live until 2035, so that's the date that I set for now, and I'd be happy to beat it. You know, when I first got into the renewable energy field in 2004, there was no incentives, and nothing was going on. And I, with my partner Alan and Mark, set a goal that we would be 12 employees and $2 million of revenue in 5 years. And I was off by a factor of 2. I was wrong. I couldn't dream that large. I couldn't imagine it. And now I feel the same way. This is a stretch goal at this point. So, back for a second. So this is a goal for people. It's not a goal for governments. Governments are not going to lead us there. Businesses are not going to lead us there. The businesses that have the most to lose will even have more difficulty. So right now, there's what's called a Renewable Portfolio Standard goal of 20% by 2020. that's an important milestone, but it would be like a couple getting together and saying, okay, well, let's have a baby and let's just get to 2 months. I mean, when you have a baby, your goal is to have a baby. And to start with 20% is just like, it's almost like just getting pregnant. That's all you got. So we really need to go all the way, right? That's the goal. The goal is not 20%. The goal is 100%. That's the goal. So, you know, this is a new sort of thinking, and again, it's more transformational. So, when I look back in time at some of the incredible social changes that have happened in our world, I come up with this, my hero, in 1831, William Lloyd Garrison. He was an abolitionist, and he spent his whole life fighting for freedom. And he wrote in his first issue of The Liberator the following: I am aware that many object to the severity of my language, but is there not cause for severity? I will be as harsh as truth and as uncompromising as justice. On this subject, I do not wish to think or speak or write with moderation. No, no. Tell a man whose house is on fire to give a moderate alarm. Tell him to moderately rescue his wife from the hands of a ravisher. Tell the mother to gradually extricate her babe from a fire into which it's fallen. But urge me not to use moderation in a cause like the present. Hits me here. I am earnest. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will not retreat a single inch. And I will be heard. Thank you, William. Okay, we have many. That's all I can say. But you know what? We've gotten here already. That's something. So, this is the boiling frog theory, and I don't know if you know that theory, but if you put a frog into boiling water, he'll jump out and he'll live. But if you put a frog in lukewarm water and you turn it up slowly, you will kill the frog. If you look back at this presentation and all these pictures and all the things about the economics and all the things about the environment and everything else, we are being boiled right now. We are all being boiled. And it's enough. It's time's up. Time's up. We've got to start. There's been spectacular levels of waste and inefficiency by fossil fuels. And it's got to end. We have to be mindful of that. And so this is sort of the biggest obstacle, is sort of a waking up and really starting to act on, oh my gosh, we are being boiled to death. We've got to do something now. So, sorry for this chart. It's showing you how many years left we have on all these materials. And you know, we have oil and fossil fuels. We've already hit the peak with oil. And that curve that I showed you at the very beginning, it almost shows you an increasing cost about 2005, which is about the time we believe that peak oil hit. And we're on the way down. We're on the way down with a lot of materials. And so when we're looking at this stuff, we really have to pay attention to what is going on. We have a finite limit. I mean, we have only, like it says here, 60 years left worth of uranium. So that's a dead end if I didn't. And so all of these things are important, and really we as consumers and as people have to really think about what we're doing when we buy something. We have to learn a little bit more. We have to get access one of the things about PV is it's made from silicon, and silicon is the second most abundant material on Earth. And so there is enough silicon to power the world, and that's one of the things that we have to do. But there's some other materials used. In some cases, like indium is used in one of the solar modules that is made today. It's not a huge factor, but it's also used for flat panel screens. And so it doesn't have a long life left, 13 years, based on the current trends. So that's not a good future. So choosing a module made of indium would not be a good choice for us. You know, I'm in the trenches of this thing every day, so I wanted to talk a little bit about it. The existing transmission system was not designed for going both ways, for generating energy at the source or bringing energy in. And I'm going to give you an example of that. P&M will do what's called a review of our application. And if within an area if there is more than 15% PV that's being supplied in that area through feeder lines, then the feeder lines would have to be upgraded, which is impossible cost to upgrade feeder lines. The next person in line would have to pay that, and it would stop PV. So effectively, right now, we have a limit already imposed on us of 15% by utility companies. Now, somehow Germany has gotten over that because they're way over 15% on their feeder lines. So something happened, and it's still working. It hasn't blown up in Germany, and I don't know. But this is one of the things that we would have to investigate. In some places, there's limited or no net metering, and there's solar access charges being required in some regions now, like Arizona is imposing an access charge. So I've been in this field in rate cases for 10 years now, and not one time was there ever any costs for the environment, for people's health, considered at all. It's not. So the economics, the environment, and health costs are not considered at all. So really, as long as that is happening, it's always going to be a difficult battle up because those costs would make a huge difference. You know, a carbon tax would effectively sort of recognize part of that, and I don't think that's going to be successful because it requires a national effort. And you know what? The people have to make this effort work. This is going to be driven by people, not by governments. So I am not going to waste my time on governments. Really, it's going to be the people that make this happen.
There's an analogy to that I just learned very recently. When you're bicycling, like mountain biking or whatever, it's another sport also. If you look at the rock you're trying to avoid, you're going to hit it.
Yeah.
If you look where you really want to go,
Yeah.
then the rock
Is in the background. Yeah, he was saying that in terms of your direction, if you focus on the rock, then you'll hit it. And if you don't focus on the rock, you focus on your direction, you will survive. Oh yeah.
The thing that always occurs to me about P&M is that they seem to just have an infinite supply. If they want to build some more houses on the outskirts of town, nobody ever says that, well, we've got to limit this or limit that. Or a big company needs to do some big project using a lot of energy. I don't know where it all comes from, but P&M never says we have to create some sort of cap on this and wait or do something. I never feel that.
Well, he made the point that you never see P&M saying, no, we have no we can't add any more onto this feeder line. We can't add any more power. We never see P&M say that, and it's true. It seems one-sided, doesn't it? Okay. Whoop. So, okay. So we have some really embedded situations here. We've got a $26 billion a year bill to maintain the roads, but we're only spending $13 billion a year. And we're expanding every year $16 billion, which means that we're increasing the unmaintained amount of roads that we have. Light rail is more effective. President Obama had approved a bunch of light rails across the U.S. Not a single thing has happened as far as I know. Interesting enough, in our own hometown, Mayor Gonzalez recommended that we block off the plaza. And there was an uprising from businesses saying that they would be impacted. But in Europe, this has been going on forever. They've been blocking off plazas and it actually increases their revenue. So we have a lot of work to do to get people aligned with what we want. This is a graph from Richard Swanson, and this guy started in the PV industry back before anybody, I mean, I was almost barely born here, in '78. And he explained to us all the ups and downs that he's gone through in the solar industry. And every time something would happen, he would think, oh, it's the end, or oh my gosh, finally. And this is the graph that shows that up and down. Hit the button. Okay, natural gas shortage, good. 3 Mile Island, great. Second oil crisis, great. Whoops, Reagan, boom. Natural gas glut, bad. Natural gas shortages, okay, it's good, and keep going, and we go on and on and on. German feed-in tariff, thin films, California, strategic initiative, silicon glut, thin films take over. Nothing stopped solar, nothing. It keeps going. So, first steps. You know, I don't know if you noticed, but when you buy a new car, have you noticed that all of a sudden everybody's driving the car just like yours? I mean, that has happened to me. I mean, I buy a car and all of a sudden everybody's got it. Well, it's the same thing here. As soon as you start to pay attention to this concept, this goal, all of a sudden you see everything in a different light. It's like opening your eyes up. All of a sudden I found all these things. As soon as I made this goal, I saw, oh my gosh, there's a company already doing this. And look at this, our vision. If not you, then who? If not when? If not now, then when? That's a great vision. That's what we need in order to make this happen. 50 states, 50 plans, 100% renewable energy. You click on a state and it tells you the profile for renewable energy. And so we have New Mexico. By 2035, we have 4% residential, 15% PV plants, CSP, concentrated solar power, 50% onshore wind, government PV, geothermal, hydro, 123,000 jobs, 10,000 operation jobs. We don't need as much energy because this is so wasteful compared to renewable energy. We actually can reduce the amount of total energy we need. And then this is the amount of area and the amount of money we will save from not exporting it out of our area. So this is another organization, and I changed their 2050 to 2035. I already decided that's not acceptable. Okay, fossil free. Imagine if we called our broker up and said, okay, on my fund, on my retirement fund, you're investing in solar. I want you to, I'm sorry, you're investing in fossil fuels. I want to get out of that. And if everyone does that, all of a sudden what's going to happen is the cost of money for fossil fuel companies is going to go up through the roof. And that is going to put them out of business eventually. So it'll eliminate their ability to borrow money. The next slide is showing you what some students said, and I'll let you read that. So rising sea level, if it melts the caps on both ends, will cover half of the total populated areas of the world right now. So if all the caps melt, roughly 4 billion people will have to find another home. I'm going to there's more steps than this, and I believe that, there's probably a million good ideas in here, and so I'm going to keep going. Building the community is so important. Can you imagine an arrangement where 1 hour equals 1 hour no matter what kind of work you do? This is what the Time Bank does. The food co-op has a situation where you work and that helps lower the cost. And then Reunity is using food scraps to compost, and we bought some compost that comes from that.
And Albuquerque has a time bank also through the Peace and Justice Center.
Awesome. Next. Okay. Like I said, we can't wait for governments. We can't wait for companies. We must organize and act. And I invite you to examine this and understand it and agree with it or argue with me that it's not right. And I urge you to join this movement. And I'm going to put this on a website. It's going to be right now. I've got a Facebook set up, which is going to be let's see, what is it? 100% renewable energy, New Mexico. How hard is that to remember? The other thing is that fortunately we have 50 employees of Positive Energy. Regina here, our leader, is going to help us reach this kind of goal in the time frame that we want to. So I'm going to close with a quote from I Ching, which seems appropriate for the time we're in. After a time of decay comes a turning point. The light that has been banished returns. There is movement. The movement is not brought about by force. It is natural. The old is discarded. The new is introduced. Both are in accord with the time. Therefore, no harm results. Thank you. That's it for the. If you're interested in joining this movement, I'm going to send out. There will be something on that Facebook account. 100% Renewable Energy New Mexico that you can go to, and you can get this presentation there. So, thank you.